Is the modern data stack dead? No. Not in any way that matters to you as a data practitioner, despite the influencers who say that it is. As someone who was around in the pre-modern stack days, let me tell you, there were very significant and expensive technical things that you needed to do to spin up analytics at your company. You had extremely expensive on-prem data warehouse solutions. You had extremely expensive on-prem data integration providers. It didn't scale very well. There were massive implementation costs, and it took quarters to spin up. And it was just a huge challenge to implement. When tools like Redshift and Fivetran and Looker and dbt and all the other interesting technology tools in what is generally considered the modern data stack came out, it was like a huge weight was lifted off your shoulders. You could very easily and cheaply and quickly do things that used to be extremely expensive and unwieldy. And that new way of doing things, data stacks considered as multiple layers, right? You had the ingestion layer, the warehousing layer, the modeling layer, the visualization layer, and you had companies in all of those categories. With ingestion, you had companies like Fivetran. With the warehouse, you had companies or products like Redshift and Snowflake and BigQuery that made it far easier than the previous generation. For modeling, you had tools like dbt. For visualization, you had tools like Looker and Tableau and Power BI and visualization tools that come into your data. For external data, you have a solution like Delivery Layer, but I wouldn't consider necessarily Delivery Layer as part of the modern data stack. But anyways, that modern data stack was sort of easy and cheap to spin up and gave you essentially unlimited scale. And that sort of group of companies and capabilities was called the modern data stack. And none of that is going away. It has become the dominant way of doing analytics. Nobody is going back to the previous generation to ask for any of these tools back. They're very happy to continue using these tools. So of the people that you might hear talking about how the modern data stack is dead, they seem to fall into two camps. Camp number one is that the modern part of the modern data stack isn't really necessary anymore because it's just the data stack now. This way of thinking about building data capabilities has won. It's not competing against any pre-modern way of doing it. I'm okay with this. I think the modern data stack is dead doesn't appreciate that many companies are still on that pre-modern data stack and haven't moved over. Also, I think that when junior people see influencers talking about the death of the modern data stack, it's very possible to get the wrong ideas about what that means and whether it's worth investing your time learning certain tools or certain ways of doing things. But overall, it's probably fine to drop the modern. I wouldn't say it's dead though. I would say it's so successful, it became the default. That's very different than dead. So I think the framing of the modern data stack as dead is sort of disingenuous, but do you really need modern anymore? Maybe not. So is it dead as a marketing term? All right. The second category of people who are saying the modern data stack is dead seem to say something to the effect of the modern data stack has problems and we should be killing it and doing something else. For me, I'm a strong believer in this idea of you never get rid of your problems, you only change them for new ones. And so I will be the first one to agree that the modern data stack has problems and that anything that you do have problems. The goal is that your new problems should be better problems than your old problems, but you're always going to have problems. So for me, sort of the two biggest problems with the modern data stack are, number one, that it was so cheap to get started and it is usage-based pricing mostly. So a lot of companies got into trouble where they didn't put a lot of thought into how they were going to use these tools. And so they ended up being far more expensive than people thought at the beginning. I think that that is something that companies do struggle with. And I think that that is a problem. Bringing better price, giving customers more confidence in what they're going to pay is a good evolution to what comes next in the modern data stack. And then the second criticism that I agree with that I hear about in the market is that there are sort of too many vendors with thin slices of capabilities. Really, we should have some sort of all-in-one solution that just wraps up all of these capabilities into one thing that companies can buy and get a best-in-class experience across all of those different layers. And I generally agree with this as well. I think there's a sort of, this constant tension between consolidation and disaggregation. There's a benefit to having everything consolidated into one place. There's a benefit to having everything disaggregated and being able to buy purpose-fit tools for every single use case. Probably most companies in the analytics world would benefit more from an all-in-one solution. I think there are a lot of consulting companies or productized consulting companies out there that are offering all-in-one solutions that are stitched together from a lot of these tools. I think that that's a smart place to be. And I think that for most companies, having a professional services firm run a generic modern data stack for you is probably a smart idea. So to me, those are fine problems and they are problems. But right now, there are not solutions to those problems that have gained enough market share to the point that you would call the modern data stack debt. And so for anyone who has seen any of the marketing materials or the thought leaders talking about the death of the modern data stack, my point of view is that it is not dead. It is more alive than ever. And it would be certainly nothing has gotten to the point where you could call the modern data stack dead. And it is more alive than it's ever been. Thanks. Bye.